The Syrian Crisis, a comprehensive analysis. The Syrian conflict, which began in March 2011, stands as one of the most devastating and complex crises of the 21st century. What started as a series of peaceful protests quickly spiraled into a multifaceted civil war, involving numerous domestic and international actors with competing interests. To fully grasp the crisis, it is essential to understand its origins, the key players involved, and the humanitarian, political, and geopolitical consequences that have unfolded. Origins of the Syrian conflict. The Syrian crisis was rooted in both regional and domestic discontent. Bashar al-Assad's government, which inherited power in 2000 after the death of his father, Hafez al-Assad, presided over an authoritarian regime characterized by widespread corruption, economic mismanagement, and suppression of political dissent. While Syria experienced some economic growth during the early 2000s, this growth was unevenly distributed, benefiting elites while leaving rural and working-class populations marginalized. A prolonged drought between 2006 and 2010 exacerbated economic hardships, particularly for farmers, displacing hundreds of thousands of people to urban areas already struggling with unemployment and inadequate infrastructure. The Arab Spring of 2011 acted as a catalyst for unrest in Syria. Inspired by uprisings in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya, Syrians began to demand political reforms, economic opportunities, and an end to decades of authoritarian rule. The regime's violent crackdown on peaceful demonstrations, including the use of live ammunition and mass arrests, escalated tensions, leading to a full-scale rebellion. Key players and dynamics of the conflict. Domestic actors. 1. The Assad regime, the government, led by Bashar al-Assad, sought to retain power at all costs. 1. It relied on the military, intelligence services, and loyalist militias such as the Shabiha to suppress opposition. 1. The regime's actions, including the use of chemical weapons, barrel bombs, and siege warfare, have drawn widespread condemnation. 2. The opposition, initially composed of diverse groups of protesters, the opposition fragmented over time. 2. Secular and moderate factions, such as the Free Syrian Army, FSA, were soon overshadowed by Islamist groups like Jabhat al-Nusra, later rebranded as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and ISIS. 2. The inability of opposition forces to present a unified front undermined their effectiveness. 3. Kurdish groups, Kurdish factions, primarily the Democratic Union Party, PYD, and its armed wing, the People's Protection Units, YPG, established de facto autonomous regions in northern Syria. 3. While they focused on protecting Kurdish interests, their role in combating ISIS earned them international recognition. International actors. 1. Russia, a staunch ally of the Assad regime, Russia intervened militarily in 2015, providing air support that turned the tide of the war in favor of Assad. 1. Russia's interests included maintaining its naval base in Tartus and asserting its influence in the Middle East. 2. Iran provided extensive support to Assad through funding, training, and deploying fighters, including Hezbollah militants. 2. Tehran viewed the conflict as critical to its axis of resistance against Israel and Western influence. 3. The United States, initially hesitant to intervene, the U.S. supported moderate opposition forces and launched airstrikes against ISIS. 3. Its involvement was complicated by competing priorities, including counterterrorism and supporting Kurdish allies, which strained relations with NATO member Turkey. 4. Turkey's role in Syria was shaped by its opposition to the Assad regime and concerns over Kurdish autonomy near its border. 4. Ankara supported various rebel groups and launched military operations to push back Kurdish forces and establish safe zones. 5. ISIS. The rise of ISIS added another layer of complexity. 5. The group seized large territories in Syria and Iraq, committing atrocities and drawing international military intervention. 6. Other actors, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE supported opposition factions, while China and other nations provided diplomatic backing to Assad. 6. European countries focused on addressing the humanitarian fallout and combating extremism. Humanitarian impact. The Syrian war has resulted in one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern history. Death toll estimates suggest over 500,000 people have been killed, though the true figure may be higher. Displacement. Over 6.8 million Syrians have been internally displaced, and more than 5.6 million have sought refuge in neighboring countries such as Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. This mass displacement has strained regional resources and triggered political tensions in host countries. Human rights abuses. All parties to the conflict have been accused of violating human rights, including indiscriminate attacks on civilians, torture, and the use of chemical weapons. Economic devastation. Syria's economy has been decimated, with infrastructure, healthcare, and education systems severely damaged. Political and geopolitical consequences. The Syrian conflict has reshaped regional and global politics in profound ways. 1. Power shifts in the Middle East. The war highlighted the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia, as well as Turkey's ambitions to expand its regional influence. 2. Western retreat. The perceived failure of Western powers to effectively address the crisis has diminished their credibility in the region. 3. Rise of non-state actors. Groups like ISIS demonstrated the potential of non-state actors to exploit instability, posing long-term security challenges. 4. Humanitarian diplomacy. The crisis underscored the need for robust international mechanisms to prevent and respond to conflicts. Current status and outlook. As of 2025, the Assad regime has regained control over much of Syria, but the country remains deeply divided. Reconstruction efforts face significant challenges due to ongoing sanctions, lack of funding, and political instability. While large-scale fighting has subsided, localized clashes persist, particularly in the northwest and Kurdish-controlled areas. The international community continues to grapple with the aftermath of the war, including addressing the refugee crisis and seeking accountability for war crimes. Achieving a lasting resolution will require addressing the root causes of the conflict, ensuring justice for victims, and fostering inclusive governance. The Syrian crisis serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of prolonged conflict and the complexities of navigating geopolitical rivalries in a fractured world.